Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar this evening. Nice to see you all here. We have a great group. Really pleased to see you all here. Thanks for attending the webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sridhar. I'm a mindset and strategy coach. Essentially what that means is I assist companies and individuals to grow their results and to essentially take their results to new levels. I'd like to be able to share with you tonight. We're going to have a specific focus. Obviously, we're in an unprecedented time in human history in terms of what's going on with many or most of us currently being locked away in our own homes, something that we really haven't seen the world over happen with so many different people at one time. So I know that a lot of people are going through a lot, and I thought I would just, one of the things that I do in my work is to often work with people in the sense of dissolving challenges that are in the way, particularly in a mental capacity, and the difference that that can make when we do empower our mindset, irregardless of the challenges that are actually happening around us. So again, thank you for attending. And before we begin, there will be a question and answer period at the end. So if you have questions during the time that I'm speaking, please note them down. You can just put them in the Q&S box, which we'll come to at the end. It is a really good group this evening. We have quite a lot of people attending. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment and in people's minds. The more questions that we have, generally the better that the webinar goes. In that if you have a question that you'd love to ask, I'm certain that someone else or someone else's will also have the same question. So if we start with what I'd like to share with you this evening is what I call some hidden keys to success in dealing with the current situation, the current environment around coronavirus and all of the impacts that we're all going through. My work is based on what I call the hidden keys to success. The reason I call them that is after hitting a low in my life around 27 years ago and having a turnaround where I really became dedicated to fulfilling my potential and assisting other people to fulfill theirs, there was a lot of information that I gathered along the way that really just didn't do the trick for me, or didn't do the trick, or as I say, didn't do the trick enough for me. And so when I found or find something that really does is effectual, gets the job done, helps people to get results, whether it be myself or people I'm working with, I call it the hidden keys, or put it into the hidden keys to success. And again, I call them hidden because they're not always the most talked about things. They're not always the most popular way of looking at something. So I'd like to share some hidden keys to success with you this evening in specific relation to how to reduce anxiety in regards to dealing with coronavirus and its impacts, and also how to keep moving forward, which is a really important thing to keep in mind, not just to hold up and get caught up in emotions and stories, which we'll talk about shortly, but how do we actually utilize this time to continue to move forward? And I'd like to share some hidden keys to success with you in that regard as well. So we'll jump right in. Again, if you have any questions, please note them down. I won't stop to take them as I'm speaking, but we'll certainly have time at the end. I'm prepared to be here for as long as people have questions. It's, as I say, an unprecedented time, and I'm happy to share everything I've got to be able to help you to navigate this as successfully as you possibly can. So I'd like to start with one of my favorite quotes of all time. It comes from All Blacks coach Steve Hansen. And although it's in a sporting capacity, was said in a sporting capacity, it's certainly true of what we're experiencing now. And in fact, I found that it's true in all aspects of life. And that is the simple notion that worry is a wasted emotion. The reason I start with this is I know a lot of people right now are worried. There's a lot of anxiety that's happening for a number of different reasons. And, there are very, very understandable reasons. So in no way, shape, or form am I trying to say it's wrong. I'm just trying to say it doesn't help. If you look at worry, it doesn't really create anything constructive. It's just basically on top of dealing with the things that we're already dealing with. When we have worry, we just have that much more that we have to deal with on top of that worry. So in other words, if you think of the energy that worry takes, if you think of how much of our thought patterns that it takes up, worry in itself becomes an additional problem to dealing with what it is that we're all actually dealing with at present. So We'll start with the premise that worry is a wasted emotion. And of course, the question then becomes, if I am worried, which many people are in the world at the moment, what can I do about it? And of course, that's what we're going to speak about on the webinar this evening. So keeping in line with sharing the hidden keys, as I was saying, this is the first hidden key, or hidden key number one. Your perception determines your being, and your being determines your outcomes or results. So I'll say that again. Your perception determines your being, and your being determines your outcomes or your results. So if we take a look at today, what are some of the perceptions that people are having about coronavirus, about the impacts, about the lockdowns in many countries? I know we have people from New Zealand, Australia on this call, as well as other countries in the world. Much of our countries around the world are in lockdown. Many people around the world are in lockdown. So during that time, and with everything that's going on, there are three predominant mindsets that I've been able to see in regards to how people feel about what's going on. The first one is an end of the world or an end of my world kind of mindset. One is I don't know, and the bottom one is what I call big picture or opportunity mindset, which I'll come to in a moment. A vast majority of people at this moment will be in the top one. It's the end of the world, or somehow they view this consciously or unconsciously as a very negative experience. And if you look, and of course, now I want to say before I go on that these thoughts can be conscious and you can be aware of them, but you may also not be aware of them. You may be having, thoughts that are subconscious, if you will, and you'll know that you're having that because you feel these feelings or some version thereof that follow that particular mindset or that belief structure, like anxiety, fear, worry. These things come from a doom and gloom or an end of world mindset. So essentially, if our perception, our predominant perception of this situation is it's very negative, it's the end of the world, those types of things, and I'm going to be using some examples this evening to describe that, then your likely being, which is what I mean by your perception leads to your being, the likely being is doom, gloom, anxiety, and most often a shutdown. Another way of looking at the situation is I don't know. I don't actually know what's going to go on. And first, before I go forward, I want to make sure and say, why do most of us have an end of the world mindset? Well, certainly one of the reasons why is what we're watching on the news. I really do want to be clear, and I'm not intending to be judgmental in any way. It's just a factual thing that if you don't know it, you may want to. And that is that the news is not really about news. That's not the point of it. If you look at how news perpetuates today or is successful, it's about emotion, how inciting emotion. So how much emotion that they can incite means it keeps people coming back for more news, essentially. And that's the cycle that we're in, is that it's very difficult to separate what news is news and what news is inciting emotion. 99% of it, to me, is inciting emotion. There's a little bit of it that's actually the news. In terms of sources, because I had someone on the last webinar say, well, when we're inundated with this, how do we separate the two? I personally just go to news sources that are actually the news, like government websites and those types of things. They don't get into opinion or aggrandizing or making things worse or focusing on the worst aspect of something and blowing it up, which is essentially, if you look at it, that's the modus operandi of news. I would just personally suggest staying away from it. If you're feeling anxious about it, I would just say stop listening to it, because the vast majority of it is just taking a small fact and blowing it up into a big story so that we can incite emotion. So it's one of the ways that's perpetuating it. I'm going to talk about some other ways that are that we perpetuate that sort of negative or end of world mindset. So I don't know is really that. Do any of us know what the outcome of this is? We don't. And do any of us really know what the actual picture is? And I think that's a really important thing to say. And I want to be 100% clear that I'm not saying I don't know means it's not something to be concerned about. I'm just really just saying I don't know. A lot of times when people believe that they're in I don't know thinking, they're actually not. They're projecting their story onto I don't know. So whenever someone says, I'm afraid of the uncertainty and the unknown, that's actually not true. It's uncertain. There's nothing to be afraid of. But if you're then projecting onto the uncertainty that it's doom and gloom, then you will potentially be afraid. And then the third one, and I know some people may not be able to get to this place, but it is the most powerful place that we can be. And first of all, let me say that I don't know is also quite a powerful place because it leads to a sense of calm, security. We just plan for it. Instead of getting caught up in the emotion of it, we just say, I don't know what's going to happen. Let me look at all the various eventuations and make some planning in regards to that. The main difference between I don't know and end of the world thinking is one is emotional and one is not. One is anxiety ridden and one is just calmly going about taking care of the things that we need to take care of. There is a third mindset, and if you look at any perceived negative experience in our life, if we look at the global financial crisis, for example, if we look at the Y2K technology crisis, for example, if you look at the stock market crash of 1987, or a myriad of things that we have gone through, there are people in that always come out winning. They don't just get through it or survive through it, they actually win through it. And that's what I call big picture opportunity mindset. And that's where we actually get ourselves into, I'm going to speak about it in a little while, of how can we actually access that mindset. But it's where we get into a whole different part of brain. Essentially what we're dealing with here is which part of our brain do we handle the situation with? At the brainstem, we have what's called the fight or flight thinking and the mechanisms that are associated with fight or flight, running, safety, issues of survival, etc., which puts us into that doom, gloom, anxiety pattern. As we go up the functions of the brain, we get into I don't know, and we get into things like questions and these types of things, which I'm going to speak about soon. And then if we go again to the highest levels of the brain, we start getting into asking different questions, which is, how can I actually make the most of a situation? And I know how that might sound to some people now, but I'll go back to saying that how we perceive this situation is going to determine who we are in it, and who we are in it is going to determine largely the outcomes that we experience. So I first wanted to deal with the people that may be on that first category, that doom and gloom. One of the things that I've discovered in what I do in my work is that every challenge or difficult time also has its hidden opportunities in them at the same time. And one of the opportunities we all have now is a higher degree of self-awareness. Being in homes in close proximity to people, you'll really get to see your behaviors, you get to see how you react or respond, and we can either react emotionally or we can take the opportunity to actually look within and grow as human beings. And I'm very much dedicated to helping as many people do the second as possible. So first of all, if you're in that mindset of doom and gloom and anxiety, it's really not going to do any good to talk about how do we make the most of it and how do we get into big picture opportunity mindset. So what I wanted to do is to give you first an exercise around dealing with fear and to actually talk about fear for a moment, what it is and what we can learn from it. These times are really amazing to learn about fear because we're in it. Many of us are actually feeling that fear. There's something that's happening that leads that fear or anxiety to come to the surface. So one thing we can see about fear, there's an interesting thing about it. So fear, first of all, is an imagined outcome. And what I mean by that is if you look at the moment right here, right now, you're fine, right? Aside from whatever is going on in your mind state, you're here on a webinar and you're fine in this moment, which is the one that's real. So if you're feeling anxiety or panic or fear, it is a future outcome that your mind or your thoughts are perceiving that then causes the emotion. So again, there's a difference between living in reality and living in imagination, or what I'm going to talk about as a hidden key, living in questions and living in imagination. What many people are doing now is living in imagination. I'm going to get coronavirus, or the world is going to come to an end, or the financial markets are going to never come back, or all these types of things. Or if you happen to have lost a job or a business, I'll never be okay again financially. These are the types of things where you can't know that outcome. Okay, things are happening now, but fear is always a future imagined outcome. If you're writing things down, you may want to write that. Fear is a future imagined outcome. It's not happening now. And another thing about fear is that fear stops at a particular place. In other words, when we have a fear, we're fearing an outcome, and the thinking does not go beyond that outcome. I recommend that if you're facing a fear, understand the fear that you're facing, come face to face with it, and then ask this question, well, what happens then? So I've been working with some people of late around coronavirus and around their anxieties, around the impacts of it. There seems to be two major themes to the impacts of to what are making people afraid with regards to coronavirus. One of them is the virus itself, getting sick, losing people that they love, those types of health concerns. And the other is more from a financial impact, that some terrible financial thing is going to happen to them in the future, that they're going to be in a very, very bad place financially. So what I ask people to do is to forward it to that worst moment of time. So one example, recently, I've had this quite a few times over the past few days, particularly since lockdown and these types of things in the country I'm in New Zealand, and also in other countries as well. So people have got to the place where they believe they're going to be potentially financially ruined. And so the fear will be, I'm going to be in financial strife. And so what I ask them to do, and this is what I'm going to ask or offer, or at least suggest for you to do, if you're feeling any kind of fear and anxiety, imagine the worst moment of it. So go actually face, and it has to be the lowest moment, the absolute lowest, and it's a single moment in time. So for example, I was working with someone, I'll talk about stories, I won't talk about who I've worked with. I've asked permission if I can do this, and clients have agreed. So it's either a person or a conglomerate of people that I'm going to be putting together as a story of what I've been experiencing. So one scenario is a person who is looking in their bank. So this is the lowest it got for them. They're looking in the bank account. There's nothing in it. And then the bank calls on a loan and says, we need the loan. We're going to call in the loan. So that's the moment. And there's a fear around it. There's a real anxiety around it. There's a panic around that moment for that person. As they got present to it, I said, where are you? Where are you sitting, lying, or standing? And they said, I'm sitting on a couch. Okay, great. There you are. There's the call. Now fear stops there. It doesn't go one moment after it. But what if you did? And this is the question that I asked. What then? What happens? How long do you sit on the couch? Well, not very long. What do you do? Well, I get up and I make some calls to the people that I have loans with, and I say, look, it's a very difficult time, at which time the person started to realize that everybody's already understanding anyway in our world. This is happening to the whole world, and there's quite a lot of understanding. And so they went there and I said, well, then what happens? Okay, well, I've called that and called these people, and actually, you know what? I have quite a lot of people in my life that'd be willing to help me at that point, so I'm probably going to call those people, and they'll be able to help me, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, then what? Well, you know what? I'm going to really get off the couch, and I'm going to be hungry to go out and this person's a business owner that I'm thinking of, to make more business happen. Great. How are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to make calls. And they just started to go forward from there and forward from there. And in the end, what they realized was, I'm actually going to be okay. There's just going to be a period of time where things are a little bit different, but I'm going to be okay. And if you don't stop with your greatest fear, face it, and then say, what then? You'll see. You're not going to sit there and rot and nothing happen. You're not going to, or say, you know what I mean, is you're not going to sit there and not do anything about it. And you have people in your life that care about you, and you have opportunities that are going to come to you, or you'll figure them out. And if you look at that bottom question, what have I been through where I really didn't come out okay? If you think of all the things, and I know many people have been through a number of different things, but weren't you always okay? And haven't you always come out okay? If you're thinking no, I've got proof that you are, because you're on the webinar, you're here, right now. So that is the thing. So fear is going to keep us locked into a state, but one of the ways to face that greatest fear, or to come out of that fear or dissolve it, is to just keep moving forward from there until you see the point where I'm actually going to be okay. Okay, so hidden key number 3. And this is to live in questions, not your imagination. I'll repeat that. Live in questions, not your imagination. A lot of this has to do with what part of our minds are we going to navigate this situation with? Are we going to navigate it by fight or flight, worry responses, and shutting down? Are we going to ask certain questions so that we can get into I don't know space? Or are we going to even ask certain questions to say, how can I become a winner here and make the most out of an opportunity? And again, I'll share with you, some of my keys are overlapping a little bit. But when we come to talk about contrarians, these are the people that always make the most of a situation. And afterwards we think, well, how did they do so well? Because they navigated it differently than most other people. So I put together a list of some questions that you can ask. One of my favorite techniques is called The Work. It's by Byron Katie, and it's a series of questions where you actually question the thoughts that are creating the emotions that you're having. So one thing that you can do is to identify, what is it that I'm believing? If you're, the way that you know you're believing something is that you're feeling something. If you're feeling it, it's an emotion, it's caused by a thought. So coronavirus can't actually create you to feel emotional. If it could, then everyone that's going through it, or the coronavirus situation, if it could incite emotion, then all of us would be feeling the same emotions, and we're not. I've even with my own clients that I've been working with, some of them are feeling anxious and panicky, some of them are feeling excited, some of them are feeling indifferent. There's all sorts of, so coronavirus isn't causing the emotion. What we project or believe onto coronavirus is causing the emotion. So if you're feeling something, say it's fear, for example, find out what it is that you're feeling afraid about. I'm feeling afraid. I had a person that I worked with recently. They felt afraid because they truly believed inside that the whole world was going to get coronavirus, including them. And so when we question that, well, can you really know that that's the case? Like really know, not just think it, but really, really know factually that that's the case. And then, well, no, of course I can't. So it's questioning those. Can I really know if what we're believing is leading us on these paths? Then we can question it. And if what you're believing isn't really the case, then you may want to know that. And again, to do with the being and the perception, what is your being when you're believing and holding on to that? So this person's being became really fearful when she believed that that everyone was going to get coronavirus, that she was going to get coronavirus, et cetera, et cetera. Her being became anxious, panicky, really, really frightened. You could see it. And so, and then I said, well, can you really know? Well, no, I can't. So what does that make the way that you're being? It makes it based on just a false perception. So what's your being if you change that perception? Because you can't know that that's the case. Well, I'd actually be calm. I'd be fine. I'd realize I'm taking care of myself. And she just had a bunch of different things. And all of a sudden you could start to see her shifting. And then we just said, well, how's the opposite more true? Well, we're all taking measures. We're all here. Most of us are holed up. You know, the governments are taking measures. People are taking measures. And then she started to realize she's healthy. And as she was doing this, she was literally coming out of the mindset. So if you believe in a story, and what many people are doing is living in their imagination, and then it's fueled when they turn on the news, and of course they pick up the one case that's going to make everybody get really, really emotional and think that's going to happen to everyone. Really, if you look at the facts, that's not happening. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But so far, it's not all doom and gloom. It's enough to protect ourselves and to be cautious and, you know, take precautions. But again, it's best from a non-emotional place. So as she was coming out of that, you could just literally see her demeanor changing. And that's one of the things that we can actually do, get into I don't know mode, and then we start taking some actions to go forward. The last 3 questions have to do with if you're in a business. These are some powerful questions that I would recommend any business owner to do, or if you're part of a company or a business. These are the types of questions that will start to get you to use more of the useful, I mean, look, if a bus is coming towards you, then you need the fight or flight response, right? If a bus is coming towards you, you don't want to be asking questions, you just want to run. But that's not the situation that we're in. So the higher the brain aspects, if you start to ask these questions, I'm asking questions of the business owners that I work with. What do people in your industry need now? If you haven't written this one down, I'd highly recommend you write this down and really ponder it. You don't have to force yourself to come up with something, but as the key set suggests, live in questions, not your imagination. If you live in your imagination that says it's doom and gloom, you're just going to go down that pathway. It's an endless roller coaster, or an endless slide down a slippery slope. But if you interrupt those thought processes with questions, well, what do people in my industry need now? And then it will start to get you to think about and to adapt, which is the second part. And those are the people, those are the companies. It doesn't have to be if you're just in business. It can be if you've lost a job, or if you're feeling your job might be threatened. These are the questions you can ask. What do people need now? And if you're in a business, I highly recommend you to do that. Otherwise, how can I adapt to these changes? These are the companies that are willing to and able to adapt. Again, they get off the train of the thought and they say, how can I adapt to the changes? What can I do? And whether that be that you're doing it now, or whether it be that you're preparing to do it once this is, once our lockdown periods are finished and we're out living life normally again, or somewhat normally again. How do I adapt to those changes? One thing that I can say is, if you're in a business, you want to be on the start line, prepared and ready to run once these things turn around. If you look at any challenge in the history of humanity, there are turnarounds to it. Every financial market crash has a financial market lift. Every negative thing comes out with positive opportunities at the end of it. So a question you can ask is, how can I adapt to these changes? And a really important question is, what opportunities are there in this? There are tons of opportunities in every experience. Most people are living in how terrible it is, and basically exacerbating that story rather than asking, what opportunities are around me? But for the people that train their mindset to start doing that, you'll be on a different pathway and not only see, but make use of those opportunities. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to write them down and ask at the end. So hidden key number 4, these are definitely polarizing times. So what do I mean by a polarizing time? A polarizing time is where something significant happens. For most of us are on a day-to-day kind of journey where things don't change that much. If you look at it, for example, I know I use the stock market quite a bit. It's just a really good example because it's the easiest thing, or one of the easiest things to see how much it fluctuates based on people's emotions. If you actually look at the facts, not that much has happened yet. It's what people think is going to happen. That's where the panic happens. That's where the fear happens, in terms of markets, in terms of everything else, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of business opportunities. So polarizing times create polar opposites. And one polar is going to be people worrying and fearful and shut down and anxious and closing up shop. The other extreme is people that are going to be just going nuts in their minds, going in a positive way, going, what can I do here? And I've already had some of my clients that I've worked with that are thinking in that motion. I can guarantee those are the ones that are going to do very, very well. Not just clients, but whoever's thinking in that regard. So polarizing times create opportunities. This kind of is built on the last hidden key, but the hidden key part that I wanted to add here is, be proactive, not reactive. Be expansive, not contractive. So if you're proactive, if you get on top of it, if you get that mindset and you dissolve the fear and anxiety that you're experiencing, if you have it, and you start asking these questions, you're getting proactive already. And however long this lasts, you will be, when we come back from it, you will be ready to go. You will just be ready to make use of all these opportunities. You've thought them out, you've planned them out, you've made some moves and some changes and some structures to be able to be proactive. Whereas what most people, or many people, are doing now is they're being reactive. They're reactive again to an imagined future where there's doom and gloom. It's a lot of wasted opportunity and a lot of wasted energy. And be expansive, not contractive, right? Obviously, during these times, it's been shown that this is unprecedented, but during these times, alcoholism goes up. Unfortunately, domestic violence and those things go up. These are people being contracted. They get into addictive behaviors to try to cover up fear and those types of things. But the people that are going to do the best and fare the best out of this are the people that are actually expansive. They realize that's what I meant by big picture opportunity mindset. We're going to come back from this, right? There are going to be some losses. We've had some losses already. That isn't inevitable. That we're going to have that. We will come out of it. And when we come out of it, It's going to be, in essence, in some ways, a new world with many new opportunities. And for people that are seeing that side of it, they're starting to be expansive, not contractive. And that's something that I highly recommend as a hidden key. And again, this hidden key 5 does follow on a little bit with some of the other ones, but this is a hidden key I talk about quite a bit, which is to be a contrarian. So again, it's a term that's often used with investors, but it doesn't have to be that way. But if you're familiar with the term contrarian investing, and this is not an investment webinar, but there are opportunities there, and I hope you're seeing that I'm utilizing this in any way, in business opportunities and personal opportunities, even in opportunities with your family that you're home with now. Again, if you're not, if you're going against the grain, a lot of the grain right now is people fearing and worrying against the grain, is going, how can I make the most of this maybe once in a life opportunity to have this time with my family at home, if that's your situation, or to, if you're not having a family there, to maybe have other people that are that you can reach out to or connect with and that type of thing. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, most likely. So a contrarian is simply someone who does what everyone else isn't. So the masses right now are in anxiety and they're worried. The contrarians are doing some of the things that we're talking about here. They're thinking, they're asking questions of how can I make the most going forward. It's called contrarianism. And I highly recommend it here to not go with the pack and continue to watch things that are going to make you feel negative in your mind state and get worried and live in that emotional worry and live in that imagination of all of those outcomes, but to actually be the contrarian that are doing some of the things that we're doing here. By the way, contrarian investors are some of the most wealthy people on the planet, because when people like now are panic selling, they buy, and when people are in the euphoria of buying once it's already past its due date, these people then sell, and that's how they make their money, and they're very, very, very successful contrarian investors. But not just in investments. How can you be contrarian in your business? You can be contrarian in your business by not holding up and worrying and that kind of thing. You can be expansive in your thinking. If you can find that, ways to do that. And really what I want to reiterate here is all it takes is living in those questions. If you live in those questions long enough, what do people need now? What can I offer? What's it going to be like? Where are the needs? Where are the opportunities? Then you will just keep asking the question until the answers come. They will come. So hidden key number 5 is be a contrarian, be different to everyone else here, plan for success rather than worry and hold up and plan for the worst and those kinds of things. And then hidden key number 6. Now this might be, I did this webinar last week when we weren't on lockdown. It can be a little bit difficult. For those of you that are still earning an income, if you've worked with me for any length of time, we're not going to go very far in the conversation before I make a suggestion of saving, and that's saving money, putting something aside and continuing to do that precisely for, well, I don't say just for times like this. Generally I say save to build and have another source of safety and growth income going over here. But when it comes time with it, for those of you that have ever been to a financial freedom seminar or anything that I've done, we talk about saving so that you can build wealth, but you might remember I always say, if it comes to a time, which none of us could imagine would come, if it comes to a time where you need it, it's there. And so there is the investment part of this and all that, but it's just saved. So I would say right now, it's not a time, most of us can't go anywhere anyway, but it's not a time, there's online shopping and that kind of thing. It's not a time for frivolity. It's not a time for unnecessary spending. It's a time for putting something aside, moving forward, investing in yourself, essentially in your thought processes and those types of things, and saving and putting something aside so that you can go there. So if you're still earning now, I recommend you, kind of budget that out for the period of time. No one knows how long this is going to last if you're in lockdown, but in the future, I just wanted to put this one in there for the future too. It's exactly the kind of thing that I've always said to save about, because if anything ever happened like this, you'll be prepared for it, as well as an opportunity in the future to achieve financial freedom. So these are the 6 hidden keys. I wanted to go through them, and I wanted to allow a bit of time for questions this evening. So I'm going to stop the share on the video, and bear with me for just a moment. So there is a Q&A box. If you can have a look, what I'll do is I'm just going to take my picture off the screen, And I'm going to allow a few moments for in the Q&A box or in the chat box. Hopefully you can see a Q&A box. I'm just going to open mine. So if you have questions about anything, it was a lot of information that we just talked about there. Any questions, and again, if you have questions, it's going to be other people are going to have these same questions. It is an opportunity to be able to ask them. No question is the wrong question, so please do ask whatever you have. So we'll give it just a few minutes here, and then we'll go for those. In fact, I'll just leave the picture on so that no one thinks it's finished. Okay, cool. Okay, so Dave's letting me know the Q&A box is up and running well. Okay, thanks. So we've got a first question. Please continue to, I'll just answer live. So, okay, so there's a question that's come in. How do you deal with people who are in these panicked level 1 states of mind? It's a really good question. The thing that people feel that they need to do is to kind of fix the other person. And that's what I would recommend not doing, because they're going through their own processes. They'll be going through their own stories that they're projecting. What I do in that case, first and foremost, is I dissolve anything that's actually going on in my mind about them first. So, for example, I might say, the question would be, you know, they're driving me crazy. So if I'm having an emotion of anxiety, I'll say, okay, well, maybe it's not coronavirus that's causing me anxiety. It might be they're driving me crazy. So I might just question that, and I'll go, well, okay, can I absolutely know that that's the truth, that it's them that's driving me crazy? And then I'll go, well, I think they are, but maybe my own thought processes might be able to do that. And then if I go to the next one, which was, well, what do I become? What's my being when that happens? I'm anxious, stressed, you know, all those types of things. Maybe I get angry. Maybe I either shut down internally or I explode towards them. I would say that, you know, those types of things, particularly now because people are going to be in close quarters, really understanding what your projections are onto other people are going to be important. The general, I call it the ego mind. I'm just going to use that as a simple term. It's the one that we're mostly using. Anytime we have an emotion, that's the one that we're believing. We're believing thoughts that are being given by that. It's always projecting onto other people what our state of being is. And the first thing that I do is to actually just realize it's my own state of thinking that's creating that, not the other person. If after that they're that way, I might just say, look, is there some way I can help? I might help with this is precisely why I'm doing these things on the webinar this evening, that you might say, look, are you willing to take a look at it? What are you actually feeling, you know, really anxious about, and being willing to question it or whatnot? If they're not, I might just say, look, you know, I don't have anything against you or anything, but for my own sense of peace of mind, I need to spend some time in my own room, or, you know, those types of things. So it's very impossible. It is impossible to change someone else. But what I talk about in my work quite frequently is that when you change you change the dynamic of the conversation between you, and that's the best thing that we can do. It also changes how you speak to that person and the feelings, if you can follow here, the feelings that they get from you. And they'll know when you're judgmental of them even before you open your mouth. And when that's removed, there's more of a safe space to be able to have a different conversation. So, okay, good. Some good questions coming in here. What process do you use? Yeah, basically there are different processes that I use in my work. I've chosen the most simple one, the most straightforward one, simply because it's easy and is something that anyone can do, is to first of all realize that if I have an emotion of any kind, I might say, I mean, it's very difficult sometimes for people to get, because we grow up believing and even saying, you made me feel angry, or you made me feel upset, or you're upsetting me. But what is something that I've realized in all the work that I've done is that no one can upset me, because if I don't project some sort of thought pattern onto it, and again, why this can be difficult to see is because the projections are unconscious and usually repetitive. You'll see that we have similar reactions to different people on different things. But if we can actually stop and just internalize, because I can never change anyone else. So that's the bottom line. If I'm going down the road, and this is what most all of us do, is we try to change other people. But it doesn't work. If you look at how well that works, it generally makes them more the way that you didn't want them to be in the first place. But if I internalize it and say, what's going on here with me? This is the opportunity that everyone has. And if I could say one thing on this webinar, it would be the hope that people would take this opportunity to actually see that it's our own minds that are creating things. And I'm not saying that we're not dealing with some real things. Some people had to, move offices in a day or two. We have to, significant shifts and changes going in our life. But my experience of people is we're handling that. We're handling those challenges. What we don't handle is our perceptions of other people. And again, we tend to project that on them. So one thing that I do is I literally just put the focus, and this is where the real growth opportunity is to say, what am I actually experiencing? What are the feelings that I'm having, etc. And then ask those questions that I was talking about before. So that's the methodology that I generally use. And there are other ones, but that's the one I would say that would be the most simple and straightforward in this kind of time. Okay, so we have another question here. Dealing with spending all this time with a spouse and children in the same house, how can we make this easier? Again, I'd probably say there would be a few answers to that question. It's a really good question. I'd say there's a few. In my work, I work in 3 different areas, and I would probably suggest that all 3 of them could assist in regards to the situations that we find ourselves in. One area of my work is around clarity, one is around strategy, and one is around mindset. So one thing that you can do, I mean, for some of us, and I know we see it as a distraction, and if we're feeling fear and anxiety, it can be challenging to get to this place. But in some ways, if you think about it, this may be an unprecedented opportunity to spend time that we otherwise wouldn't be able to with loved ones. So one thing I'd do one thing you could do to make this better is actually create an inspiring vision around what you want to achieve during that time. And you don't have to just do it in the family. I'm doing it across the board in many different areas because it's a different time. So what are some of the things that you might love to do or to get done, etc. And one of those things I'd very much say, your family's there. How are you going to deal with it? Again, are you going to deal with it as a negative thing? Or are you going to deal with it as, what would we do here? And let's ask some questions. Or would you take it to the next step, opportunity thinking, and say, if this is a special time in my life, what could I actually create with them? And then from that clarity, you could create an inspiring vision. For people that work with me, we often work with what's your inspiring vision? What's going to call you forward? And what's your inspiring vision with your family or your roommates or whoever you happen to be holed up with at the moment? What would you love to create and make it a proactive thing again instead of reacting to a situation? Make it proactive as to actually accomplishing something with that person or those people. So that's one way. Then you could create strategies around it. I know some people have created game days or things that they just never would have done together, certain types of talks and these kinds of things that they have together. That's another way that you can essentially make the most of that time. And then mindset, again, would be what I was speaking about before. If you find that you're getting upset, look at it in a practical way. You can just, if you have different spaces in the place, you can have different spaces. You can even, as long as you're not close to other people, you can step outside, you could go for a walk. I'm a fan of those things temporarily, but I'm a bigger fan of, in addition to those things, take the opportunity to say, what's actually going on in here? This is where the real growth opportunity lies. Already with clients that I've worked with, these times are really good because they bring up what I call stories, right? If you think about what's upsetting you in regards to the people you love, it's not the first time you experienced it. You've experienced it with other people or with those same people in the past. It's your own patterning. And these types of things bring that to the surface. And if you've got these kinds of strategies, which is precisely why I wanted to do the webinar for you, was so that you can employ some of these things and actually grow from it and take things to another level. So that's one way. So it's a combination of get inspired, create some strategies, but also definitely address it when you're experiencing something with those people. And you're not in a great place. Really look internally rather than actually projecting it onto them. That's where you can get personal growth. Okay, we have another one here. Really great questions, guys. So thanks. I'll say guys for everyone. Sorry, that's just my American thing. But really great question. So the next one is, following on from that, How do you suggest dealing with people who might attack you fearing you have the virus? I had that very situation at the shops where a woman accused me of being sick. The ego mind went into defense mode and that made the situation worse. Yeah, so that would have been a perceived threat. And again, if you look at, look, I'll just go as deep as you guys want me to go. In the neurological system in the body, when we have a threat as a child and we have a response to that threat, in moments of real perceived significant threat, we lock a pattern in. So if you think about the patterns that the mind goes through, we lock a pattern in. And it's a pattern of thoughts and a pattern of emotions and a pattern of reactions. And what happens is, and this is why it's very difficult, because the number of people that I've spoken with that have said, well, Sridhar, I've tried to change my behavior, but it's that quick. And it is that quick because it's habitual. So you may not be able to stop the defense pattern, but you can notice it. Again, a real opportunity here for all of us is one of self-awareness. And so what you can do, it's sometimes challenging in that moment, but it's great practice. Even if you do it afterwards, it's okay. You'll still grow from it. So I would say if somebody said to me, I think you're sick, I mean, really, if I felt something about it, I would have to go away or I'd have to do there and I'd just go, okay, what am I feeling? I feel threatened. They're threatening me. And then I would just go back to those questions are a great way to do it. I could even just go, am I really sure that that's what's happening? Is that the only truth to this? Well, no. Okay, what else could be happening? Well, they're frightened, right? A lot of people are frightened when we're in fear-based mindsets. We'll do all sorts of things. All these kinds of things I was talking about before, the addictions, the domestic violence, these types of things that go up during this time, they're all fear anxiety based. They're actions based on these fears. But somebody else's fear doesn't have to become yours. That's one thing to keep in mind. That's their fear, not yours. So I might just say, calmly, well, if you're concerned, I'm happy to go over there. But if I'm not sick, I'll go, okay, well, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm not aware of that. Or, and I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just trying to be clear on that. No one's told me that. Or, by the way, are you a doctor? I'd love for you to check me out or whatever it is. But it just get people, again, I'm not trying to be funny and I'm not trying to get them to be defensive. I'm just going to be literal about it. But other people, this is a really key thing. Other people's fear and anxiety don't have anything to do with you or I. That's the thing. But when we project something onto it, we get into a story, and that's what's actually going on. That's why I'm saying that when people are reacting in a home, the first one that can, in a household or whatever, the first one that can actually understand, okay, we're locked in a story here. There's just two stories going back and forth. That's what's actually going on. So as you can understand that, you can step back from it. So that's one thing that you can do. I'd love to just say, take a deep breath or that kind of thing. It's challenging, but that is a start. Basically, the bottom line here is self-awareness. And if you can be self-aware that someone is attacking you, I mean, first of all, we just literally question that. Are they attacking you or are they just afraid? And they're kind of panicking. One has something to do with you and one doesn't. And that's what I would start to understand is that other people's, it's even a practice that you can take on. Other people's emotions or reactions aren't really anything to do with you. And if you can understand that, your reaction to them will be quite a bit different. Okay, again, if you have follow-up questions to these, then put them through. We have 3 more questions here. Definitely, these are great questions, so please keep them coming. As far as I can see, no one's leaving, so your questions are really valuable to them. So please keep them coming. Okay, thank you for the webinar. Can you recommend one daily resource we can refer to and be inspired by to maintain a opportunity mindset, please? A visual resource would be great. Okay. It's a tricky one for me because my work is really about more permanent shifts. So visual resources, auditory resources, I mean, there are things like, finding a picture, if you have a magazine or online in a printer, as a picture to put in front of you to kind of to actually visualize. So there are things like what we call affirmations or pictures that are more in your mind to help to keep you going forward. So for example, when I work with athletes, it's very, very common that if they're running a race, for example, they were literally visualize every moment of the race, so that they play it into the muscle memory, and it gets locked in there. And so instead of having to think about it, they're training their bodies to do it. If you want to do that, then I would get some sort of picture about being, again, the two fears that most people are having are around health and well-being and financial. You can see yourself, visualize yourself. If you said, I've made the most of this opportunity, this is one thing you did. If I made the most opportunity, what would it look like? So forward yourself, say 3 months or 6 months, see yourself with clients all over the place, or see yourself with people flooding into your business, or however it is that you want to do that. That's one way that you could do it, but it would be personal to each person. What's important for a visualization to work is it has to be personal to you. It has to mean something to you. Also, the statement has to mean something to you. So if you say an affirmation, it's got to be something that really applies, that hits you quite deep inside, and then you can repeat it. I have given people very specific things to repeat, but I'd have to speak with you personally on to know what that is. There isn't one thing that you can do, but here's what I would say to do that would be the most powerful practice that I've ever used, and that is to write the question down and to literally just look at the question and get your mind state in a place where you're asking, what are the opportunities here? This is what I'd say. You can even visualize it. What are the opportunities that are coming up? And just, your mind is likely to tell you, what opportunities? We're in a coronavirus situation. There are no opportunities, but keep asking. What are the opportunities? What are the opportunities? Then close your eyes. The deeper that you can go with that, it's about waking up centers of the brain. You might have heard that if you don't use it, you lose it. It's true, and during these times, most of us lose the capacity, or start to lose the creative centers of the brain. And this opens the creative centers of the brain by asking questions, because the brain will always respond to whatever question you ask it. So that, I know it's probably maybe not exactly what you're wanting there, but I have to give it to you in the way that I work. I mean, a visual resource would literally just be, get some sort of picture that you want it to look like, and deeply meditate on that picture until you feel like you're in that moment now, and that can help to bring it about, whether it be health-wise, whether it be mindset-wise. But I would say, please don't forego that opportunity to ask questions. The question is where I would do it, because then it won't show you just one picture. It will show you all sorts of different things you can do. I've been practicing this and have already had numerous ideas about how to move forward in different ways. So that would be, hope that answers your question well enough. Okay, someone asks, how can you spread this mindset to someone who is happy to be stuck in the doomsday scenario? It's a great question. I.e., to be positive and innovative during these times is becoming unpopular. I'll answer the first question. How can you spread this mindset to someone who's happy to be stuck in that doomsday scenario? It's an old adage, but it's true. You just have to be that. How do you get them to be that? I don't know. You can't. I have one prerequisite for anyone that I work with. They have to want to be there. And they don't have to want to be there. Sometimes people will say, oh, can I bring so-and-so, a family member, and that type of thing. But I have to find out why they want to be here, because if they don't, you can't give something to a person that's not asking for it. I'm going to repeat that, because this is probably going to be very useful. You can't give something to someone that's not asking for it. You just can't. People say, Sridhar, why don't you help these people? Why don't you help these people? Because they're not asking. So how do you help somebody that doesn't want it? You don't. But what you can do, let me be a little bit careful on that. You can help them, because when you shift your own perceptions, I'll see if I can say it to you this way. Whether you realize it or not, when you're seeing that person that you're talking about, you're already judging them. You're judging them whether you know it or not. You're judging them as, say, being stuck or being negative. So the moment you come in the room, you're highly ineffectual with them, because they already know that you feel they're stuck. I'll say that again. I mean, if they know you're close to them, you know that sense of, how your loved ones think and feel. They don't even have to say anything. People know when you're judging them. They have a deeper sense of when that's going on. So if you walk into a room, or not even walk into a room, you don't even have to be there, and you're judging that person, there's no way you're in a space to help them, because you're not speaking to the person, you're speaking to the stuck one. And imagine those tables are turned and somebody's coming in to unstick you and see you as stuck. You're going to dig in and dig your heels in and say, I don't want to have a bar of this. And that's what's actually occurring with those people. So the best thing that you can do is to resolve your judgments on them. You change, you speak to them differently. And I'm not just being semantic, being semantical here. It works. Often people would just, all of a sudden people will say to me, I've dissolved that judgment on that person. And all of a sudden they've changed, or they've changed towards me. So that, again, I know it's a repetitive answer, but there's been a long time that I've done this, and that's the bottom line. The more we try to change someone else, the least that's going to happen, and the more we actually really look at, how am I seeing that person? If a person comes to see me and I see them as stuck, I'm hopeless from the beginning because there's no way to speak to that person. But if I see them for their potential, I'll speak to that potential. I'm not involved, I'm not attached. That's the best thing, the best way that we can actually help someone else. So hopefully that covered that. If not, feel free to ask another question there. Okay, so someone said, I missed what BPOM was. So BPOM is one of the 3 types of mindsets. So it's big picture opportunity mindset. So currently I was just saying that there are 3 types of mindsets that people are generally approaching the coronavirus situation with and all the impacts. It's the doom and gloom, it's the I don't know, or it's the big picture opportunity mindset. So basically it's just looking at the opportunities that are available, which there are numerous. Okay, so next question. If an opportunity presents itself, given the circumstances, how do we tell if it is an opportunity or risky? I'm going to need a little bit more information on that. I'm not 100% sure. I might go to the next question. So Beck, you've answered that. If you've asked that, if you could just give me a little bit more context on what you mean. If an opportunity presents itself, given the circumstances, how do we tell if it's an opportunity or risky? I need to know a little bit more before I could answer that one. If you could let me know a little bit about the opportunity, or you mean financial or some sort of business opportunity, that type of thing. Okay, we've got another question here, and then again, we still have a bit of time left, so I'm happy to stay. If you have other questions or questions about some of the answers that have happened, please write them in the Q&A section, and we'll go from there. So the next question, how do you handle a partner who's very negative and reactive to the news, especially if you are self-isolating with them and struggle to get away? If it's one room, it can be very difficult. But I mean, I would do 2 things. It is a bit of a repetitive answer, but it's what I would do. I would first of all really question my perception on their negativity. I might be perceiving them as negative when really what they're doing is, to them, they might be thinking that they're informed. But if the behavior really wasn't setting my mind, wasn't working for my mind state, I'd go wherever I have to go. If it was a broom closet, I'd get away, or I'd take walks. I mean, if I were in that situation, I'd personally probably I'd look for the opportunity in it, and I'd take a lot of walks, just making sure if you're holed up, that I'm 2 meters away from other people, and I would go and do my own stuff. And then if they say, well, why are you leaving? And I wouldn't judge them. That's the problem, is when we say, well, you're being negative, that's not really going to help anything. But if I say, well, the way that you're going about this, and I would be matter of fact, the watching of the news, if people are watching news, I will, my wife doesn't do that. We're both on the same page. Like, we'll watch, we look for the fact. It's probably in the first 30 seconds of the news, and then we turn it off. But if someone was doing that, and they said, well, why are you doing that? I should go, well, watching the TV program incessantly about the negativity doesn't really work for me, and I'm going to go for a walk. So if you'd like to have me around, then you can do that. But again, the key thing here is make sure you're doing it without emotion. If there's judgment in the space, it never goes well. But again, this is an unprecedented opportunity, as I've been saying on the webinar, to dissolve those perceptions and then have a different communication. So, and then I would, I love to go for walks and do mindset stuff and do the visualization that was brought up earlier. I do a lot of living in certain kinds of questions about opportunities and about what I'm thinking and those types of things. So that's where I would go with it. You can't really change someone else. It's the key thing, and this is counterintuitive to people because we grow up believing the answer and the solution is to change that. It's so embedded in our subconscious mind, we're doing it without even knowing it. You should do this. You should stop doing that. If you think about people saying that to you, how you react to that is exactly how they're going to react to that. No one wants to be made to feel, or no one wants to feel wrong. That's where we get defensive and we do these types of things. So, so I would say that, essentially that's where I would go. And then just say, if you'd like me to be around, here's my requirements, that the news isn't on and that we talk about something positive. Or if you want to go on about with the negative stuff, then, I'm going to have to leave you to do that in a tape recorder or something like that. But don't make them wrong. That might be what they need to do. But there are opportunities, and thankfully, even people, because I've had people say, look, I'm in a very small place with someone. We can go for walks. We can do things like that. And if that helps you to keep your sanity and grow, then I would suggest to do that. Okay, cool. So, so I've got one here. Sridhar, I think they're asking, oh, okay. I think there's one on another one. So I think they're asking what mindset to adopt in times like these when they believe there is an opportunity, but perhaps are hamstrung by their beliefs of their imagined outcomes of the coronavirus. I think they're looking for encouragement to stay in the mind frame. Okay, cool. Thanks for the clarification. So yeah, I would say in that case, what I've been talking about on the webinar is the most effective way that I've seen to do that is to simply turn the mirror. Yeah, I'm deciding on whether to go somewhere, but I think it's probably going to be a little bit too much. But I'd say if you look at a mirror, okay, no, I won't do. I will go there. If there are 3 people in the room and you're talking about the same person, let's say that's being negative, it's highly possible and probable, in fact, it's nearly impossible for this not to be the case, that the 2 other people that are looking at the one see a different version of the person. So in other words, if somebody's watching news, one person might say you're being really negative and another person might be saying, oh, you're being really informative. So if you ask the question, in reality, which one is that person? The answer is always neither. So the person that you're judging is actually just your perception in the first place. So in other words, you're not dealing with the person, you're dealing with how you're seeing that person. And how you're seeing that person is in your mind, not theirs. So this is why I'm suggesting that you question the perception that's going on in here and look at it, hold up a mirror and say, what's actually going on? Because it's all going on in your own mind. Because 10 people could be in that room and all 10 people could see a different person there. I hope you get what I'm saying there, because so which one is the person? They're none of them. They're just who you're seeing them to be. So you're not actually reacting to a person, you're reacting to who you see. And if you can change who you see, that's why I say the perception leads to the being. If you change your perception, a lot of what we're talking about on this call is changing your perception. And if you change your perception, they change, and then everything changes. Your communication changes, the outcome changes, everything changes. So that is the best way that I could say, that's the mindset. I would say if I put it into a nutshell, I've said this for a number of years, people that get introspective, and it's a really good opportunity to do that. The moment that we become introspective and stop projecting everything out here, in whatever way, shape, or form we start looking inside, we're going to grow far beyond where most people ever grow. And that's the opportunity here, is to be able to do that. And that's the best way that I could say to begin to shift that mindset, is to first and foremost, before you project onto the person and want them to change, ask yourself what's got you upset, hold up the mirror, and the process that we were referring there. If you give me your email addresses and that sort of thing, I can give you some feedback on, some basics on how to do it, or hopefully I'm hoping that you wrote those down from when we talked about them earlier. It's literally that process. I wouldn't make it any more complex than doing that. It's a powerful process and it works. There are other ways, and some people work visually, some people work more auditory and those types of things, but some way I'd say the ultimate thing is the introspection. Okay, questions keep coming in. Can these questions be used for children? The simple answer is yeah. The children tend to be much quicker because they don't have a lot of the fluff in the way. You may have to do that in a bit of a special way. So essentially, or a different way, essentially what we're talking about here is really just stopping. Instead of getting caught up on a runaway train, that's the mind just, going crazy about the future and what's going to happen and all this type of stuff. We're just stopping and actually going, what do we really know to be the truth? And what happens when we're forwarding or projecting stuff onto that truth? And then what happens when we look at it a different way? What happens, for example, what would happen if we looked at this as an opportunity and started to do that? What would start to happen? So with children, you sometimes just need to find ways to speak into their listening, but it absolutely works for them more easily because they don't have as much stuff in the way as people that have been around a while with what I call stories. These stories that project they just go round and round and round and round. Okay, good. We have 2 more questions here. Firstly, what tea am I drinking? How often do you practice? What tea am I? I'm actually just drinking water. I'm drinking hot water there. So no tea, but how often do I practice to overcome negative thoughts? It's a really good question. I can only answer how often I do it. Essentially, and it depends on what you want. It's a very, very important thing to me. Once I realized that this was the thing that was leading me off course all the time, I have a very low threshold for tolerance for it. And so if a thought is debilitating or causing any sort of emotion for me, I'm onto it straight away. So one answer to that question is just whenever it comes up. And other times I say to people, it's a daily practice is a really good idea. It really fits in with you. And I say to people to make it real to you. I do this process with a lot of people, and some do it every day. Some do it when they need it. Some do it occasionally. Certainly in a time like right now, and many of us have the time to be able to do it more than we otherwise might. I'd say do it anytime you feel debilitated. It doesn't take a long time, gets you into a mindset, and this is an immediate way to shift that mindset from straight up the ladder, from doom and gloom to mindset opportunity, because it literally takes you out of the identity or the story and puts you onto a better mindset frame. And it's also a much better place to be asking some of those other questions that I was talking about, like business forwarding questions or job forwarding questions, or in any area of your life, whatever area is important to you. If it's your family right now, then you can ask. If you stop being really frustrated with them, then you can say, okay, what can we do today to actually make the most of this experience and have fun? Interestingly, those of you with kids, when they grow up and are gone, you're going to go, oh gosh, I wish I had that time with them and this type of thing. Well, some of you have it right now, and this is the time to actually make use of it. It won't last. And these are ways to be able to do that and practicing this is or something, whatever works, and not one thing works for every person, but practicing something that shifts that mindset. I've just shared the one that I've come across as the most simple, straightforward, and doable. Anyone can get some results with it, usually with a little bit of work. So that's why I'm suggesting that one. So I practice it for me anytime, and I don't wait either. Sometimes I'll go, what are the repetitive stories in my mind, and let me get onto them before they even come up. I found it much more effective and just much more enjoyment in life without these negative things being in a negative state. Quite the opposite. Okay, another question here. If we are in an I don't know mindset and an opportunity presents itself financially, what tools can we use to determine if we're making the decision on that opportunity from fear given the circumstances? Such as, this is a good opportunity, but what if things change and I have no funds left if things get worse? I guess the way to answer that is if you have no funds left if things get worse, I wouldn't do it. I mean, gambling with the last bit of what you've got is just never a good idea, because as we all know now, you may need it. So, I don't know. I mean, look, is it a sound investment? I still don't know enough information. I probably have to do this on a one-to-one or something, because I don't know enough about what it is that you're talking about. I can't say, is it a good or a not good opportunity? I can say it's rarely ever a good idea to spend your last thing on something you don't know if it's going to come back. I might use Warren Buffett's rule here. Warren Buffett's rule is His first rule is don't lose money, and his second rule is see rule number 1. So if you're not sure that you're going to see a return on your principal, then I would consider it risky. I hope that helps there. Okay, do you have any insights on what is happening in the bigger picture with this virus, i.e. from a mindset, personal development, or intuitive point of view? Do I have any insights on what is happening in the bigger picture with this virus? No idea. I mean, that's what I mean. Who knows? We get tidbits of information. All I can say to you is, for those of you that don't know, I live in Christchurch, New Zealand. We had a major earthquake back here in 2011. I was in town. My family decided to drive and get away from the town a little bit because there was a lot of destruction going on where we were. And on the way, we didn't know the extent of it, but on the way, we stopped in a little restaurant to find out what was going on. On the news, they were flashing this building and that building, and we're just saying tens of thousands of people have died here. And when we found out what actually happening, it was the same building over and over again. And they were showing it, and that's 200 people, which is, we never want to lose close to 200 people. But the way that it made it look was thousands. Now, I want to be very careful to say that might be happening. I don't know. So that's the bottom line. I'm saying it's enough for people to take precautions. Is it enough to, to get worried about? I'll go back to the first slide of this saying worry is a wasted emotion. So let's say for people, for me, if you want to know, I'm just being careful. I'm observing, the rules to stay away from people and those types of things. But in the bigger picture, there's two ends of the spectrum here, and I don't know enough. There's some, potentially factual things that you can look at. One paints a picture that may not be that serious. Another paints a picture that's very, very serious. I don't know, and I'm happy not to. I'm just happy to let it unfold, and I'll focus in the moment and ask questions. What do people need right now, and what can we do? So I'm afraid the answer to that is not really. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'll give it a couple of minutes, or maybe one more minute. We are a little bit over, but again, it's potentially a one-off opportunity. I may do these again if the feedback is really good. I'm not sure, but I hope it's been of use to you this evening. If there's no last-minute questions, there aren't. So look, I'd just like to say thanks very much for tuning in. It's an unprecedented opportunity in many different ways to be there for people we love, to think about opportunities, to appreciate things that we don't appreciate or haven't appreciated to the degree that we want to forward ourselves, to forward our businesses, and various types of things. So, okay. So there's another question coming in. Okay, just a comment. Yes, please do it again. Will I be providing a copy of this recording? I'd love to say yes. Last time I said yes as well, and the recording didn't take. So the answer to that is it's my intention to make that available, and I'll do the best I can. But so in the meantime, thanks everyone. Participation is great. Thank you for all the questions. It's really, as I said at the beginning, the questions were going to make this what it was. Hope you got something of value. Be well, and keep your minds in a great state. So thanks everybody. Really appreciate your attendance here and your participation. Good night.